What's up YouTube? It's your boy Senekill back in the shop, and this is the fourth part in my Getting Your Home Fabrication Shop Started series. Alright, this video I'm going to go over some of the less essential tools that you could possibly get. Some of them can open you to a whole new realm of possibilities as far as what you can do in your shop, and some of the other ones can just make life a little bit easier in the shop. Let's start out with some of the measuring devices. You got just your typical steel ruler. This thing is really handy to have around if you just need a real quick straight edge. And you can use it for measuring, but most of the time I use it for a quick straight edge. Another thing that's really handy, this is just a stainless steel square. And the reason I like this so much is because I ground off the corner a little bit, as you can see. And what this allows me to do is, if I've got a project that's already been tacked together, or maybe some of it's been welded already, I can just go up to a welded joint, and with that corner ground off, I can just stick it in there and it'll still be able to sit flush if it is square. So yeah, it's definitely handy to have. The next thing is a combination square. You can use this for center finding. With this part right here, you can use this to 45 and also just use it as a regular square. The next thing is really kind of a multi-tool, and I picked this up at Harbor Freight, and it's really sweet. On the back side of it, you probably won't be able to read them, but it's got some drill and tap sizes. You can also use it as a square. I don't think you can use it for an inside square just because of this edge right here. You won't be able to butt it up, but you can use it for an outside square, and you can also use it for a drill point gauge, circle divider, angle finder, protractor. There's just all kinds of uses for it. Right here on this round part, it's got all different angles and things like that. So it's definitely handy to have around. If you need more of a quick way to find your angles, if your project is coming together, you just want to throw it up there just to make sure everything's right. A good angle finder can be great to have around. They also make digital versions of these. I don't like them so much because in my mind it's just something else I'm going to have to replace the batteries in, and they'll never get replaced. So this one just works off of gravity, and it's really nice to have around. They also come with magnets on the back side of them. That way you can just stick it up to a piece. But yeah, those tools are really great devices that can help you either check and make sure your project's coming out right, or as far as prepping and planning out a project, they're really great to have. The next two things aren't necessarily tools, but they can help your tools. The first one is cutting oil. This is just the spray-on brand, but it's really great to have around. It can extend the life of your drill bits and hole saws and things like that. So if you get yourself a drill press or even a hand drill or anything like that, and you got drill bits and stuff, you definitely want to get some of this to have around. Really helps out a lot. The next one, if you get yourself a wire feed welder, whether it's flux core or just a MIG, some nozzle gel is definitely handy to have around. What you do with this is you just dip the end of your gun, just the nozzle, you just dip it a little bit into that, and it can help prevent the splatter from welding to end up bonding to the nozzle too well, so you can just clean it out really easy. They also make an aerosol version of this, but this is what I use. The next thing, if say you got a small shop like me, and in your mind it might be a little bit too dangerous to have a bunch of oxy and acetylene cylinders sitting around, and you don't really feel safe about having a cutting torch like that in your shop, you could alternatively get one of these. This is just a propane torch. Now, you won't be able to really heat up some of your thicker materials, but you could heat up some of the smaller materials, and it could make life a little bit easier as far as being able to bend them and things like that. So it's not really a must-have, but if you don't plan on getting yourself a cutting torch, you could have one of these for heating up some of your smaller materials. Alright, the next two things are just a couple hammers. One's a dead blow. This is your dead blow. It's just got like sand in it, and when you hit it, it's just like a dead impact. But it's made with plastic and stuff, so it can help prevent a lot of the damage that you would cause if you did metal to metal contact with a regular ball peen hammer. And the same can be said about your rubber mallet. You just can't get as much impact as you can with this, but they're definitely handy to have. The next thing is not really necessary to have at all, but if you're building a project and you find yourself either needing some external or internal threads, whether say you're building a little wagon for your kid, you want to thread the axles and it's just a piece of round bar or something, you could get yourself a tap and die set. Alright, this is a die. I don't know if you can see that. It just goes in this little handle right here, and as long as you have the appropriate size material that you're wanting to thread, you can put yourself some good external threads on. And also the taps. This is the tap. They have all different like coarse and fine thread and metric and things like that. That way you can get different thread types. But one thing you need to know if you do get yourself a tap and die set, don't go like trying to fully thread something. Like say you want an inch of threads, don't try to just get an inch of threads in one motion, like just keep going down and cutting threads. You want to maybe take a couple turns and back off of it, then take a couple more turns, back off of it. That way the chips from the metal don't build up inside of the threads on the taps and dies. And like if you're using a tap to get some internal threads and you get a bunch of build up, you could end up potentially snapping your tap. So yeah, just be careful when you're doing that. The next thing is definitely not an essential item, but depending on what type of fabrication you're trying to get into, it may be a cool thing to have around. Dimple dies. All right, you use these with hole saws and a drill. You just, like, if you got a piece of sheet metal, get the right size hole saw, drill out your hole in your piece of sheet metal, and then what you do is you take one end of the dimple die and you place it through the hole, and then you put the other side on top of it, and as you press it together, it'll cause a dimple where that hole was. And what that does is it puts more tension on the piece of material, thus making it a little more rigid and a little bit stronger. That's great for gussets, say on like a buggy, truggy, or like maybe you're building a dirt race car or something like that. But dimple dies are a really cool thing to have around. The next couple tools I can't really show you right here on the table, so let's go check them out. Alright folks, this is one of the other tools I was referring to, and it's a drill press. Alright, if you find yourself needing to get holes in a whole lot of things, you might want to eventually pick yourself up a drill press. They're definitely great to have around the shop. This one's just a ported cable. I picked it up at Lowe's for, I believe it was $290. This one has a few different speeds, and you change them right there. But yeah, drill press is definitely handy to have around. One thing though, you may want to try to look at finding out how big the T-slots are in here. And there's different types of clamping tools that you can keep, or that you can get, that will use the T-slots. But let's go ahead and check out some of the different ways you can clamp materials. Now, if you get yourself a drill press, you may need a couple different ways to clamp some materials. Most common being a drill press vise. This is just a 4-inch drill press vise, and it's got a swivel on it. But this one, I believe, came from Harbor Freight. It was actually given to me, but you definitely need a way to clamp down materials. Now, maybe whatever material you're trying to clamp on your drill press table might be too big for your vise or just too awkward. Alternatively, you could get yourself some step clamps. These are used a lot in machining, but you can still use them just as well on your drill press. And the way they work is those T-slots on the table. This is just a T-nut. I don't know if the video will show it, but it's just shaped like a T if you turn it upside down, but it slides in that slot. And then take one of the steps. Depending on the height of whatever you're trying to clamp, you would pick the height of it, then line it up with that step, and I can't really use this, sorry. But you would line that up, and then you put your nut on it, and then that'll allow you to clamp down different materials. Also, you could use V-blocks with these, and like if you're trying to clamp down something to, maybe it's a piece of pipe you're trying to drill on your drill press, but you can't really hold it straight with your vise, you could get yourself some V-blocks. They have loads of different sizes out there, but these will hold the piece of round bar or tube or whatever you're trying to drill. It'll hold it fairly straight, and then you can just use your step clamp and clamp your material down. Now let's go ahead and check out another tool. And this is a press. Now, a press is definitely not something that's necessary right out the gate, but you might find yourself needing either to press materials together, or you could get tools like this. This is a press brake that goes inside of your press, and then as you jack the cylinder, it will press this piece down. And if you got a bend, whether it's sheet metal or anything like that, maybe you got to bend around something. This is from Swag Off-Road, but you can pull out all the different little fingers and bend around certain obstacles and things like that. But I can also use my press with my dimple dies. The main reason I got it was for my press brake and my dimple dies. But yeah, a press is definitely an awesome tool to have around the shop, but like I said, it's not necessarily essential. Now, if you find yourself doing a lot of pipe and tube work, and maybe you're getting tired of notching with a grinder, you could possibly get yourself a notcher. This is just the Bailey TN250. It doesn't come with that stand. It's actually made to be used in a vise, but tools like this can make your world a little bit easier. You won't have to spend as much time grinding and things. There is a little bit of a learning curve to a tool like this, and a little bit more math is involved, but it can help you get really nice notches. That way you can fit your pipe and tube together really nice. There is alternatives to a tool like this though. You could use a bandsaw or essentially a grinder, like I said, to make your notches. But if you're getting tired of using either one of those, you could get yourself a notcher. And this is one of the more expensive ones, but there's a lot of different variations out there. Harbor Freight has one. There's companies like JD Squared and JMR and things like that that make them. On this end, you would attach your drill, and as you see on this end, you put your hole saw. And with a tool like this, it allows you to notch at different angles. This one, the vise on it clamps in a way that holds your pipe or tube level. And then if you need to make an offset notch, you would just lower or raise this piece right here, and then it'll allow you to offset your notches. But this is just another one of the many tools out there that can make your fabricating life a little bit easier and possibly open you up to more possibilities. Let's check up on another tool that you might be able to use hand in hand with this one. Let's go check it out. This is another tool, and it kind of works hand in hand with the notcher. And this is a tube / pipe bender. And the way it works is you have this right here. This is your fixed die. It remains stationary, and you put your piece of tube in here, and this little all these little notches, it works kind of like a ratchet. And as you can see, as you ratchet it, this follower die just moves around the stationary die, and it pulls the tube around it. What you got to be careful of though, if you get a tool like this, sometimes it may not, the actual die may not put tension on the tube right at 0 once you make the first crank on it. It might be like 10 or 15 degrees before it actually gets a hold of the tube, in which case you would just subtract however much that is from whatever degree it is stating right here, and then that would be your angle. But you get all kinds of bends out of this. You can build all kinds of things with a tool like this. You can build buggies, truggies, all sorts of things. You could even do yard art and things like that with a tool like this. There's all kinds of different brands out there. This one specifically is made by Bailey. It's just a manual bender, but it's a very nice tool to have around in your shop. You could, if you just found yourself maybe only messing with pipe, you could alternatively get the cheap Harbor Freight pipe bender. You just have to watch with those tools, just because they tend to kink pipe if you're not very careful. So you just got to watch. I've used them before, and the most I could get before it started to kink was around a 45-degree angle, or 45-degree bend, and then you could see where the pipe was starting to kink. But you could potentially bend farther if you made some modifications to it. But yeah, this is one of the tools. This stand didn't come with it. I mean, it did come with the part with the bolt holes, but I just built this little frame because my shop is a little bit small, and I needed to make a spot outside that would allow me to bend full sticks of tube. And as you can see, those little pieces of plate right there, they bolt up to a stand that I made outside as well, and that way I could bend things up without, like, as you can see, my shop is quite small, without everything being in the way. So yeah. Okay folks, I just got a couple more things I want to show you. One of them being a fiberglass welding blanket. Alright, these are awesome to have if you're working on other people's things, if you're working on your things. It's a great thing to have around to protect your, whether it's your four-wheeler, your truck, their four-wheeler, their truck. It's great to have, and ultimately it's kind of an essential item. I mean, not really, you can still do fabrication without them, but like I said, if you find yourself working on other people's things or your stuff, you might definitely want to look into getting one. They're fairly cheap, probably around like 30 or 40 bucks. But another couple things is just on hand tools. Now, I don't find myself using hand tools all the time. Like, I could build a project and never touch a hand tool, but sometimes they have their place and they're needed. If you're starting out and you don't have any of them, you might just want to go pick yourself up just your basic socket set that has a good set of sockets, some wrenches, maybe a 1/4 and 1/2 inch drive, and then, like I said, wrenches. And most of those decent sets will come with like a 5-in-1 screwdriver and all that, and you might be able to hit all of your needs as far as hand tools with a set like that, and you might be good. But like I said, I don't find myself using hand tools all the time, but sometimes they're absolutely necessary. So eventually getting yourself a decent little set of hand tools is definitely a great thing to have around. Alright, I'm just going to go over a couple other tools that's out there that you might be interested in. Depending on what type of fabrication you plan on getting into. If you plan on doing a lot of like ornamental things, whether it's like yard art or just art in general, you might want to look into different things such as scrolls. Those are really good for rolling out S-curves and flat bar. They also have an attachment for them where you could use do it with round bar as well. There's also a thing, it's called a picket twister, and you would actually use a picket twister for twisting square stock to kind of give it that candy cane effect. That's really awesome and it really looks cool. I've used them before. They're really, really great tools. There's a company called Metalcraft USA. While on the expensive end, they do make some really nice tool sets as far as those type of tools. You might want to go check them out. At least you could go there and look and see what other types of tools they have, and maybe you can find a cheaper version somewhere else out there in the internet. Also, if you want to look into doing a lot of sheet metal work, if you find yourself doing that kind of work, you may want to invest in, you could go to the bare minimum and get yourself a stump and just kind of hollow out a bowl shape in the stump and make sure you got a smooth curve in it, and then just take your different types of hammers and just hammer out your curve, and you can get different contours that way. There is other ways out there as far as shaping sheet metal. You could just get yourself a sandbag, and like I said, there's different types of hammers out there. They have plastic and rubber teardrop type hammers and things like that, and there's loads of different shapes depending on what kind of shape you want to get out of your sheet metal. You could also look into an English wheel and planishing hammer. They also make real big sheet metal brakes, and they kind of work kind of like my press brake, but you could do longer sheets of sheet metal with them. Most of the time you can't hit the really thick like plate or anything like that, but if you're, like I said, doing sheet metal work, definitely a cool tool to have around. I think that's about it for this video and for the playlist. I hope all these videos I've done is able to help you out, and maybe you could start getting your shop set up. I appreciate you guys watching. Peace.